minutes, we will welcome the #1 New York Times best-selling author and leader, Stacey Abrams. To our stage for the Kidnote event. Thank you so much, Stacey, for being here today, and having your presence here means everything as we reemerge and come back stronger than ever. Special thanks to our host today, the Decatur Book Festival sponsor and invaluable festival friend, the First Baptist Church of Decatur. There are so many sponsors to thank this year. We can't mention them all, but they are all listed on the slideshow that's been running on the big screen behind me. I will call out their names because I have to. They keep the lights on, okay? All right? I will call out their names in the order of their sponsorship, starting with our 2 literary luminary circle sponsors. Folks, bear with me. DeKalb County, Joe Barry Carroll Family Foundation, City of Decatur, Visit Decatur, Decatur Downtown Development Authority, Emory University, Lulu Ma Foundation, Rough Draft Atlanta, Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Atlanta Writers Club, DeKalb County Public Library, DeKalb Library Foundation, Georgia Center for the Book, First Baptist Church of Decatur, Georgia Humanities, the Local Palette, the Task Force for Global Health, and Agnes Scott College. And many thanks to our partnering booksellers. The festival could not happen without them. So remember to buy the books. Buy lots and lots and lots and lots of books, because a portion of the proceeds go back to the Decatur Book Festival. We want to thank Brave and Kind Bookshop, Harris Books and More, Eagle Eye Bookshop, Little Shop of Stories. If you are inspired to make a gift to the Decatur Book Festival to help support the festival well into the future, please go to our website at decaturbookfestival.com. We are so fortunate to have incredible leadership in our board of directors. Please stand wherever you are, our wonderful DBF board of directors. And a huge thanks to this year's staff, or folks we consider staff, because of the huge amount of time they spent planning the festival. Leslie Wingate, our extraordinary executive director. Denise Auger, program director. Steve Salcedo, street fair manager. Sarah Sanders and Emily Giglio. Joe Davidge and Allie Stonewright from the Georgia Center for the Book. Shelley Woodruff, Deborah Pyron, and Mickey Goodson from the First Baptist Church of Decatur, Ted Nelson and Wendy Bohannon for the culinary stage. And let me express our deepest appreciation to the hundreds of volunteers who are supporting the festival this year. All right, I'm done. And now, allow me to introduce our Executive Director Extraordinaire, Leslie Wingate, who will open up the program. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. If you were here last night, you might hear some of the same things. I'm actually going to keep my remarks very short so we can get on with the program, but I cannot tell you how excited I am that this festival is back. It's in Decatur. And it's not going anywhere. I was in the right place at the right time. I worked for Emory for 20 years. I retired. I was retired a month, and then I became the executive director of the festival. Right place, right time. Huge thanks. I have to extend my thanks to Allison and the board, Fifi and everyone on the board, Tara. They have supported me and encouraged me, and they have faith in me, and that has been wonderful. The staff, again, Denise, Steve, Sarah is actually my daughter who does all the marketing communications, Emily. Personal thanks to the church team. And we actually have the pastor of the church with us here, David Jordan. Please stand. Honestly, I actually worked for a church for 3.5 years. This church is unbelievable, and I should do a commercial for them, be their prime testimonial. I have never worked with a group that is so community-oriented, so kind, so giving, so generous, so gracious, so patient. I could go on, and we are just so fortunate. Shelley, Deborah, Mickey in particular are the three we've really worked with. They're like a team of staff. I mean, they should be paid staff at this point. So thank you. And I do want to mention that David's sister is here as well. She's an author and will be reading in the storytelling. Joy Jordan Lake, thank you for being here, Joy. So, the run of show this evening, today, I'm back to last night. We're going to have a fascinating conversation, there's no doubt about it, between these two activists, Stacey Abrams and Katie Rinderle. In the interest of time, we are not doing Q&A today. Following the conversation, Ms. Abrams will sign books, and I'll come back at the end of the conversation with those details. So now it's my honor to introduce our speakers. Stacey Abrams is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of Rogue Justice, While Justice Sleeps, Our Time Is Now, Lead from the Outside, and the NAACP Image Award winners, Stacey's Extraordinary Words and Stacey's Remarkable Books. Today she will talk to us about her book, Stacey Speaks Up, the third book in the Stacey Stories picture book series. She's also, again, she needs no introduction. She's an entrepreneur, a political leader, and so many other amazing things that we admire her for, including her game-changing activism. Katie Rinderle, who we're so thrilled to have with us today, is going to be our moderator. Katie has a big story to tell. I'm going to let her tell it. We're thrilled to have her with us. She's a Georgia-based educator and advocate for inclusive education that centers on the well-being of all children. And before I move on, I did want to recognize Stacey's parents are in the audience too. I'm so sorry I didn't recognize you. So let's move on to the conversation.
First, thank you so much for being here today, Stacey. I am thrilled to be sitting with you and talking about your new book, Stacey Speaks Up.
Thank you. Thank you.
And to start, I would like to ask, would you like to start with reading of the book, Stacey Speaks Up, a little bit before we get into our conversation today?
Well, I see there are a lot of little people who have the book, so we're going to read a little bit of it together, okay? So, but I'm 50, so I have to put things on my eyes so I can read. Okay, we're going to start with, let's see, page 1. I'll read a couple of pages. Mr. Dexter's class excitedly lined up. The whole school had voted on the special lunch they'd get at the end of each week. There was a tie between pizza and tacos, and the entire second grade voted for French fries. So, Principal Howard made a compromise with TacoPizza FryDay. This was Stacey's favorite part of the week, after Adventure Day in the library. She always sat with her best friend, Julie. In the cafeteria, Stacey laughed at Julie's knock-knock joke. Zivko tried to balance his tray on his head. Standing in line to pay, Stacey heard a boy in front of her whisper, "I don't have any lunch money today." "I'm sorry, but the rules are the rules," the cashier explained. "I have to take the tray back." Frozen, Stacey watched as the boy walked away without any food. Suddenly, she wasn't hungry anymore. At the lunch table, her friends giggled and gossiped. "You're not listening," Julie complained. "Are you okay?" "Not really," Stacey replied. Zivko shook his head. "But TacoPizza FryDay is the best." Quietly, Stacey told them what happened in the lunch line. "I should have offered him some of my food." He probably would have been embarrassed," said Jake. Well, Stacey felt herself getting hot and jittery. "I still should have done something." Jenny shrugged. "What could you do? We're just kids. We don't make the rules." Well, I'm here to tell you, yeah, you do.
Yes, you do. What a note to end on, right? Yes. Stacey, and Stacey Speaks Up, Stacey knows that she wants to do something when she learns that her classmates can't afford lunch. What a timely issue. But speaking up in a literal sense is a little intimidating to Stacey. Tell us about your approach to writing about advocacy for young readers.
So I want to begin by thanking Katie for being here. And I know she'll tell a little bit of her story, but I think most of you know that Katie got into a little bit of trouble at her school because she read stories that let everyone feel included. So can you all join me in thanking Katie for her leadership? So one of the reasons I wanted to start answering your question, writing is one of the most extraordinary gifts that I have ever been given. And I have to thank not only my parents, who, my mom was a librarian, who made certain that we were always surrounded by books. My dad is this amazing storyteller who used to tell us these remarkable stories. And then I've got one other person to acknowledge, and that's my older sister, Andrea, who's going to stand up embarrassed. Andrea actually taught me to read, I think because she was tired of reading to me. But my family also taught us that telling stories is the way that you help people see possibility. And so when I'm writing children's books, I want to first and foremost respect kids, because I think kids are incredibly smart. And I think they see more than we imagine. And so part of the goal of storytelling is to take an experience they have or want to have, like TacoPizza FryDay, but also respect the real world that they live in and how difficult it can feel sometimes to speak up, to say the things that need to be said, because you've got a lot of adults telling you to be quiet. And so for me, it's about how do you take a big story and make it accessible, make it fun, but also make it real. And I grew up with a family that said that it wasn't enough to just see problems. Your job was to try to solve them, and you solve it from where you are. So if you are, let's say, if you're 5 years old, raise your hands. If you're 6 years old, raise your hand. If you're 7, raise your hand. If you're 8, raise your hand. If you're 9, raise your hand. Are there 10-year-olds here? Is there anyone who's less than 5? Is there 1, 2, 3, or 4? Oh my goodness. Yeah. Well, no matter, and I know there are 11-year-olds, but you guys are too, hi. I know there are 11 and 12-year-olds, but y'all are way too important for me. And if you're a tween or older. But no matter how old you are, especially if you're little, sometimes it can feel like the world is too big. And I want to write stories so that kids understand the world may be big, but inside, so are you.
Beautiful. We are seeing a lot of legislation, especially most recently, to expand free school lunch programs. And not only in Georgia, but also across the country. Of all the issues that are impacting children today, there are a lot. Why did you choose this as the topic?
I wanted to tell a story about a way that you can use your voice, but I also wanted a story that resonated that's a universal experience. And going to the cafeteria, that happens for everyone. But I also know that there are a lot of children who go hungry. We were privileged when I was growing up. We never went hungry, but I remember sitting on the school bus in the morning. It would be still dark outside, and we'd have to get there early because there's some kids who have to get off the bus to go inside and get free school breakfast. And I remember thinking, I really wanted to go and have breakfast inside too. I didn't know that there was supposed to be a stigma attached to it until a lot later. But I find it to be the most disheartening and solvable problem that we have hungry children in this country. And that for children, if we solve that problem, we open up their opportunity to learn, their opportunity to play, their ability to do more. And so hunger for me is one of those conversations. We've all felt hunger. The question is, how often do you feel it? And how persistent is it? And do you believe that someone's going to help you? And I think for children, kids understand what it feels like to be hungry, to really, really want to eat something. And I thought that they would also understand when you see a friend who is in need, sometimes you want to be able to help, but you can't. And hunger is one of those universal experiences where you may not have the exact same problem, but you can at least understand what your friend is feeling.
TacoPizza FryDay is the most popular school lunch among Stacey and her classmates. Why do you think that lunch is such a sacred ritual among children? And did you have a favorite school lunch?
So I would have voted for pizza. But, it's a democracy, so whatever. One of the reasons, because every child gets hungry, every child eats, and it's also, other than recess, it's the one time kids get to be as much of themselves as possible while they're in school. When you're in the cafeteria, no one can tell you to shut your mouth because you have to open it to put food in. And you can talk to your friends about whatever, you can tell silly jokes, you used to do this for a living, or you do this for a living. It's a place where children can feel free, and it's a moment where you have your needs met, but you also get to see everyone else around you having the exact same experience. And so I think there's a universality to using school lunch and using that hour or 37 minutes of freedom in a child's day to tell a story.
You speak up across all issues in our country and our state, but that had to start at a young age. What is your first memory of having to speak up, or your most formative memory of speaking up? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I'm fairly certain it's because Andrea and me and our 5 brothers and sisters got in trouble for something. It was self-advocacy probably the first time. We didn't do it, or if we did, we shouldn't get in trouble for it. But I remember my parents taking us with them. My parents believe in volunteerism, and they believe that if you saw a problem, it was your job to solve the problem. It wasn't enough to just complain. And so I do remember, my second book is actually about my friend Julie. She was part of the Vietnamese boat lift that happened in the 70s that brought a very large population of Vietnamese refugees to Gulfport, Mississippi. Julie was learning English at the same time that her family was really navigating an extraordinary trauma. And I know we've heard a lot about the refugee population in recent days and the demonization of that population, but imagine what it takes to be lifted from your home, taken to someplace completely new, try to find your way there as an adult. We know how hard that is. Now imagine being 6 years old or 7 and speaking a different language. And so my first visceral memory of advocacy was that some of the kids in our school in Gulfport, which was not known for having a very robust Asian population, they were picking on Julie. And I was pretty tall for a kid, and so my first act of advocacy was just standing in front of her because I was much taller than she was. And I figured they couldn't say bad things to her if they couldn't see her. I didn't think it all the way through. but at least I could stand, because she was very tiny, and so I stood in front of her and told the kids who were being mean to her to leave her alone because they were mocking her speaking. And then she and I went off and we started talking, and we became friends, in part because she was shy and I was reserved. She didn't trust that she could become a part of our community because she didn't look like everyone else. And I don't look like most people either, but we can like each other. And so for me, the first moment of advocacy was really literally standing up for Julie in that space, and then deciding that it was worth risking kids not liking me to make sure that she felt that she could be there.
In the first two books, you just mentioned Stacey's remarkable books, and I'm very familiar with Stacey's Extraordinary Words. How many of you have read the first two books in Stacey's series? Yes, they're amazing.
Katie got into a little bit of trouble for reading one of my books, so.
You know, I tweeted Stacey, actually. That's how I got in trouble.
Yes.
I tweeted a book review about Stacey's Extraordinary Words, true. But in the first two books, so Stacey has the opportunity to build her self-esteem and also build confidence in her classmates, which is a common theme throughout your books. How does this theme expand in this new installment of Stacey Speaks Up?
So the first book was about perseverance. You may know I tried to do something and didn't quite work out. And
unfortunately.
It's okay, it happens. In fact, it happens twice.
Perseverance.
It's okay. But the point being, so the first book was absolutely about the fact that one moment does not define who you are. And it was about finding the confidence to use the tools you have. The second book was intentionally about diversity and inclusivity, but also about even when you think you're helping someone, you're often being helped yourself. And it was Stacey realizing that while she thought she was helping Julie and her friends, they were also helping her. This third book is, for me, about refining that, and it's about the combination of empathy and advocacy. That empathy is such an extraordinary skill to have, and we can build it early, and that's why using school lunch and hunger was important. I want children to understand, I want you all, the kids in this space and the big people you brought with you, I want us to understand that empathy is a superpower. Raise your hand if you ever wanted to have a superpower. Yeah. Well, if you can imagine, your power is you can feel what other people feel, and we call that empathy. When you can feel what other people feel, it's harder to be mean. It's harder to be dismissive. It's harder to hurt someone if you can feel their pain. And then the second part is advocacy. Once you felt something, you should do something. And so for me, this book is about how do we cultivate the superpowers of empathy and of advocacy, and how do you help bring them together? And so for Stacey, she's still figuring out how to use her voice. She's still figuring out, what do you do when you see something that feels bad and your stomach feels all funny, and you know you should say something, but you don't want to because you might be embarrassed. How do you get past that? Because sometimes we freeze, and we don't want to respond because we're afraid that if we say something too loud, somebody might notice. And so if you know that you have the superpower that what makes your stomach feel funny is empathy, and then what makes your heart feel full is advocacy. And so it's when you get to do something about it, even if you can't fix everything, you can try something. And that's the goal of this book, to help children understand, and the big people who have to read the book to them over and over again, the combination of empathy and advocacy.
Kitt Thomas. Kitt Thomas is the incredible illustrator of all of your children's books. And bringing all of the Stacey's adventures to life, both in expression but also visually. What are some of your favorite moments in this book specifically that stand out to you? And we can open our books along with Stacey
Yes.
to look at some of these. Do you want to
Yeah,
as well?
open your books. You should look at some of the pictures. Kitt is a really, really amazing artist, and they love taking words and turning words into pictures. And so my first favorite picture is, of course, the one on the cover, where Stacey holds up the sign, and I love her pigtails. But I also love her friends who are in the story, and these are friends that she's found along the way. I love the picture when they're in the cafeteria and they're playing. It's in the middle of the book. But if you go to the very last couple of pages, some of my favorite pictures are when they're standing on, yeah, you want to turn that one around? When they are going through and getting people to sign up, and they finally prove that they can win, and you see Jake and Grayson and Stacey eating their TacoPizza FryDay, because it gets to happen every week. If you go back one more page, it's when they are 2 pages back. It's when they're standing on the stage. There you go. That Stacey's not by herself. Sometimes we think that when you're the leader, you're by yourself. But Stacey understands that leading just means you get on the stage first, but you're never alone. And so she's got other people with her because she realizes that you can say things, but we can get other people to help you. The more you have, the better it gets. And that's something I learned from my sister Andrea, my brothers and sisters, that when we would do things together, it was not only more fun, but if we got in trouble, more people had to be in trouble too.
Remember that lesson, everybody.
Exactly.
The power of community.
Exactly.
So I know that you are a big advocate for libraries.
Yes.
And your mother was a research librarian with
Yes.
a specialty in children's literature.
Yes.
So it was really great to see that Stacey's first step in making things right was to go to her librarian, Mr. McCormick, who encourages her to speak up to the school board. Tell us a little bit more about this choice specifically and the unique impact that librarians have on not only children, but within the school.
So I think librarians are awesome. When we were growing up, if you wanted to know something and your parents say, go look it up. This is before the internet, so for anyone under 40, this is when there were books that you had to use for everything. Well, it was even worse for us because when she said go look it up, you couldn't say you couldn't find it. She was at a research library. Like she might make you go to microfiche. Okay, that's a real old person's joke. But I mean, my mother and my mom and dad both would tell us, go find information, but especially my mom. And for me, for kids to understand that librarians are sources of power. They can help you find information. They can help you understand that information. But I also just want us to celebrate people whose sole purpose in life is to help you find the answer. That's what a librarian is. And so for an issue as big as this, I wanted Stacey to go to the library because in my life, I would go to my librarian and, the guy she married, my dad, because my parents would always help. And so my homage to the two of them is it's a librarian, but it's a guy. So it's my mom and my dad.
In the back matter of this book, that you included resources for kids who, like Stacey's classmates, can't afford lunch. Some of the resources include Feeding America, No Kid Hungry, and Feed the Children. Can you tell us a little bit more about each of these organizations and how kids and their caregivers can be involved in particular issues to use their voice and to make a difference?
So I'm going to start globally, and then I'm going to speak a bit locally. In this country, 1 out of every 5 children faces hunger. And it's actually gotten worse over the last few years. And we know that when children are hungry, it's harder for them to focus, it's harder for them to fully participate, it impedes their growth, and there are long-term consequences. And so No Child Hungry, Feed Children, these are organizations that have made it their singular mission to make certain that kids get fed, and it works. We also know that across the country, we have recently had investment in food programs, and that has been incredibly important. I will tell you that Georgia has refused to participate in what's called summer EBT. And this is not partisan. This affects, children don't have a party. They go to parties, but they don't have a party. And so it matters that the state of Georgia is one of about 10 states that has refused to accept funding to feed children during the summer, because as hungry as children are during the school year, the most dangerous time for children in hunger is during the summer, because they can no longer rely on school. And so one of the ways the country, in a bipartisan fashion, has tried to solve that is to feed kids during the summer. Unfortunately, Georgia's leadership refused to accept the money. We've already paid for it. So let's be clear, this isn't new money. We've already paid for it. They're just refusing to bring the money back to Georgia. The governor will have a chance to make a decision about this again in 2025. We need to remind him and encourage all of our leaders to feed the children of Georgia. Now, the argument, please.
Yeah.
The argument that was made was that it's not a nutritionally sound program because it doesn't prescribe things and it's not sustainable. And I would say this. What is less nutritionally sound than no food? So that's the first thing. And we may not know what we're going to do the next day, but we know what we can do tomorrow. And the more we do, the more we can do. And so I really strongly encourage, in the moment where we are watching families struggle because of the aftermath of the hurricane, now is the time to think about what do we do next? How do we help those who need help now? But also, how do we help those children who are going to need help next year? And so I just strongly encourage folks to think about, this is not about the party you belong to or who you will or will not vote for. It's about the children who don't get a voice and don't get a vote, but we need to value them every single day. And that's why solving children's hunger for me is such a critical issue.
So,
Yes.
before I was removed from my classroom, my students were actually working on a service learning project. They had, children have very keen senses of justice, right? We talked a lot about activism. We talked a lot about the things that mattered to them, that in not only our local community, but also across our country and the globe. If you could give any advice or any one piece of advice to aspiring activists of any age, what would it be?
So it is first and foremost to always combine, and let's say it together, say empathy. Y'all can say it louder, say empathy.
Empathy.
With advocacy, advocacy.
With advocacy.
So we do.
Empathy, advocacy.
So if we do that, those are the first things. The second, it's in the title. You gotta speak up. A lot of times we're really, really angry about things being wrong, but we only tell ourselves. Or we'll tell our friends who already agree with us. It doesn't help a lot, unless you're telling each other because you plan to do something. And then the third thing is, we sometimes get overwhelmed by how big the problem is. Like I just said, child hunger. That's a huge problem. Even saying hunger in schools, that's a slightly smaller problem. But you can do you get it to the smallest thing you can, which is maybe making sure that the children in your school, in your grade, have enough to eat. Instead of trying to do everything everywhere all at once, which is a great title for a movie, but a terrible mission statement. We all need to do something somewhere soon. And I want to actually lift up 3 young people. I think their names are Yeet, Bonnie, and Kaylin, who are 5th graders at 5th Avenue Elementary, who went to the Decatur School Board and said, we want reusable trays. They didn't try to solve everything. They weren't trying to save the entire planet, but they saw that there was a problem with styrofoam on the playground because of the styrofoam trays they were using. And these children organized themselves, 5th graders, did a presentation, and they took action. Every person in here has the ability, whether you're a 5th grader or 50 years old or somewhere in between or beyond, to do the work of combining empathy and advocacy, speaking up, and then doing something somewhere soon. We keep waiting for things to get better. We're waiting for ourselves. And you don't get the victory every time. I am here to, Pastor, I can testify. But you can make progress, and progress counts. We're trained in this country to believe that if you don't get all of the things, that it wasn't worth it. And that, I learned from my parents, I learned from my siblings. That's not true. Progress counts, especially when you're fighting for something so important. Progress is what we look for. And it's not about it's not progressive in the political sense. Is it better today than it was yesterday? Did I make something slightly better for someone else? When we measure our success in progress instead of victory, we see so much more that we get accomplished. And I love Katie Rinderle, and I wanted her here because she is someone who was dealt a very tough blow. And she did not give up. She spoke up. She treated her children with empathy. She advocated not only for herself, but for those young people who didn't have a choice. And then she found another place to go and do the work that she loves so much. She is a perfect example of why we may not be able to do everything everywhere all at once, but we can do something somewhere soon. And so if you don't want to be like Stacey, be like Katie, and let's get it done.
Finally, how has writing Stacey Speaks Up informed or inspired your own activism? What a question.
No, it's fun. So I love children's books. I get to write all kinds of things. I write big books for adults. I write nonfiction. I write about business. I write about leadership. But when you have to take a really big story and make it not small, but make it simpler, but still powerful for kids. And when you can write a book that means their parents aren't cursing you after the 15th read. And when children want to go back to that book, the highest compliment to me is that I've done my job well. And that's the same job that I try to do with my advocacy and my activism. I may not be able to get everything done, but writing these books is a reminder that I too can do something somewhere soon, and that not getting everything doesn't mean I didn't do enough, and that one of the things Stacey learns is that even as she makes progress, she gives this amazing speech, they don't immediately change their minds. And so sometimes persistence and perseverance is the key. We just have to outlast them, and that reminds me that we got to do that work all the time.
You truly are inspiring, and I'm very fortunate to have been able to share your stories with my own students, and I have seen the impact that your books have made on children. So thank you for all that you do, and thank you for being here today, and I'm so excited to get to move on to signing our books later. Yes. Is there anything else you would like to share before we move on to the next part of our event?
I just want to thank the Decatur Book Festival. I want to thank Fifi Handy. I want to thank Lisa, good Lord, Leslie. I know it's Leslie because I have a sister named that. But more importantly, I want to thank all of you, and I'm not talking to the adults, I'm talking to the kids. I want all the kids to clap your hands. Clap really, really loud. There we go. I want to thank all the kids for bringing your adults with you. So thank you for bringing your adults to come see me. Thank you, guys.
Aren't we so lucky? Is this working? Yes. Aren't we so lucky to start our festival Saturday with Stacey Abrams? Important information about book signing. The signing line is outside the building in front of the sanctuary. Stacey will sign books, but she does have a hard stop at noon. So at that point, she really has to leave. There is a 2-book signing limit, 2 books. In the meantime, children can line up if they want to go in the parade. It's a short parade, but it will be leaving from the front of the building down to the back of the building for the picture book session. Thank you all for coming.